Now that's significant. The Market Research Podcast.
Hello all. Thanks for listening in to this latest episode of Now That's Significant, a market research podcast. I'm your host today, Michael Howard, and I'm joined by Jennifer Trich Kremer, UX Research Lead for Logitech's digital experience. She studies consumer shopping behaviors and user experience, benchmarking to deliver actionable insights. Her expertise spans qualitative and quantitative research, including combining analytics, market and user research data to tell a holistic user story. Jennifer's focused on improving the user experience throughout her career, splitting time between design and research. Her work was integral in creating the first online ordering system for IBM, automating the manual printing process at Hewitt, and creating easy-to-use healthcare experiences. While her design experiences have been meaningful, she now focuses on research, data, and mentorship. Thanks for joining us on the show, Jennifer.
You're very welcome, Michael.
So the mentorship, just quickly, is that part of a wider organization or just something that you do personally?
It's a little bit of both. Logitech has been a great company that helps to feed my desire to mentor. So we consistently have research interns that come in, usually one at a time. Last time we had a call for interns, I got 800 applications in 5 days. That was a little scary, but exciting. But I also intern through some organizations that are free. So User Experience Professional Association, UXPA, as well as UX coffee hours. So those are opportunities to get free mentorship, to chat with somebody for a period of time.
Nice. So I'm assuming you could do a little plug for those. You'd always be looking for other mentors to help. Plenty of people wanting to be guided.
Oh, definitely. If I gave a quick plug for UXPA, the nice thing about that one is as long as you're a member, which for students, it's nominal, under $100 US, and you sign up for the program, you get 12 weeks of guided mentorship. So that's more in depth. The UX coffee hours, which is run out of California, there's a group of people that put that together and it's all volunteer. Those are more, you read people's bios and you get the opportunity to have a quick chat with them, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever's available. So those are more high level conversations, but still can provide value.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so you know what to do now if you're wanting to. So thanks for sharing. Now, Jennifer, what's the most significant thing that you wanted to share with us today?
It's really about how to make research, market and user research more impactful and how to present it to different audiences.
It should be an interesting discussion because obviously we always want to be doing that, don't we, as researchers? So, and at a time where budgets are being carefully examined, and to be honest, I guess when they're not as well, there are times when we have to fight for carrying out what we know is bread and butter, i.e. qualitative research. So from your experience, what's essential for making a place for qualitative research in an organization?
What I can tell you from my experiences is that role can really sit anywhere. Right now, believe it or not, I sit within commercial sales. Our whole entire website does. I've sat within marketing, development, user experience team, customer experience. It's really not so much where you sit in the organization, but it's the stakeholders and sponsors that you have that will really make or break your ability to conduct research and the impact that the research can have on the organization. So one of the things that I often look for along with stakeholders and sponsors, because again, if you can find somebody and you can solve a problem for them, they will be so grateful and they will be much more likely to help you and share with you. But I also look for like people within an organization. So I'll look for consumer insights team members, analytics, more traditional market research, user experience, because we all have a voice about the user, and we all struggle from time to time about getting that message out in an actionable way.
No, for sure. Are there any, I guess, nuances that you've uncovered through that from the different types of people or parts of the organization working with, and how you've had to change some of your approaches to help make that fit in with that particular department?
I can think of a few examples. So first and foremost, I'm a data geek. I think every piece of data is super important, but I can guarantee you 99% of my audience does not feel that way. So even from the beginning, I was always tempering my love to share data with what are the key messages that people need to take away to be actionable. Often when I work in the organization I'm in now, we're a sales site as well as a community for consumers, an information hub about our products. And I have to spend time tying the things that we do to how they can impact traditional performance metrics like revenue, orders, conversion. And one of the things that's been really valuable in doing that is having the qualitative research. So having users, whether it's virtually, which is how I do most of the user research here, come in, work with our site, complete tasks, give us feedback. As much as I can have all the quantitative data in the world, and seeing a human struggle or frustrate or getting feedback directly from the customer, that qualitative research, it's a really great opportunity to move people's thoughts and tasks to better support the user.
No,
Would you like
sure.
another example?
No, well, if you've got one, for sure.
Another example is I often work with the designers for our website and really translating what users are saying about the site, what they're trying to accomplish, where they're failing, and delivering really what is wrong without being overly prescriptive and telling designers or even developers how to solve for that problem, because that's their expertise. So it's always a fine line when we have data, we're representing the data, we're representing the user, and it's our job to do that well. It's not our job to tell people how to fix things for our consumers.
No, absolutely. And I guess when you're working with different departments as well, they have a lot of domain expertise in their particular career path, and you don't necessarily share that same domain expertise, but you have the data to back up. So I guess it's a really good thing. Like, this is what we're seeing, and then working with them to solve the issue.
Yeah, and it's funny, domain expertise is a good and a bad thing. It's great to be knowledgeable in your space, but sometimes, right or wrong, we become a little more focused and narrow in our thinking. So there have been times where we've gone out to consumers and, what the domain experts recommended was perfect. We didn't have any issues and consumers responded very positively. And then there's other times where the same domain expert, there'll be recommendations that we do and we come back and we're like, you know what? Yeah, we thought this was going to make sense and work, but in reality, it didn't. But here's what we learned so that we can adjust how we perceive this group of consumers or this situation to better support the people using our products and websites.
Well, for sure. So in your significant statement, you mentioned that you're committed to making market research or qual research more impactful. So we've talked a bit about the data side of things. How else do you go about this?
Everything from when we're speaking with consumers and testing, bringing people in to watch and experience it firsthand. Having clips to share and videos to share of the session so people can really put themselves into the user's perspective and have more empathy for them. And it reminds me of a story a colleague shared. When I was going for a conference, I asked, give me ideas on where, you were struggling with research, but then you had a breakthrough. And this was the best example that was given to me. I wish I had the story myself, but it was from a game creator, and the team was very good at creating first-person shooter games. Games were very well received, development team, product team, they did a great job. And they were then tasked to make a game for 8 to 12-year-old adolescents. And the game had to do with the character My Little Pony. And so this team had a researcher attached to them, and the researcher would say things like, well, I have some information about your target audience that, we should consider. And they were pushed aside and say, we're experts in building games. We know exactly what to do. And that happened a few times. And then one day they had a bunch of users come in. So picture this, 8 to 12-year-olds coming in to play a My Little Pony game. And one of the children, it happened to be a girl, she was trying to get the ponies to pass a ball back and forth. And it just was not working on the computer. And the people watching, the developers, the product teams, they were a little harsh on that little girl at first. They're like, oh, she doesn't know how to play video games. What is she doing? Like, you didn't bring the right users in. And we kind of do. Sometimes we blame the user or the consumer that's in there. But the girl tried for a few more minutes and she started to cry. She was so upset that she couldn't get the characters to do something very simple. She started to cry. And at that moment, the entire team was fully invested in finding out more about their audience and their consumer and what to do, because right or wrong, they didn't want to be the team known as the ones who made the little girl cry.
Wow. Yes. How could you come back from that?
Oh my gosh, I know. Credit to them for realizing it during the session. And the best part was, so they definitely redeemed themselves. So during the session, they made some adjustments to the game. And by the end, the girl could complete the task. So literally just getting that feedback and making those quick changes made such an impact. And it gave such a great story to tell for future products.
And that's why it's important to be working close and in real time as well, isn't it, with your consumers, with brands inside an organization too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. And we
So,
really, oh, go ahead.
No, you can't carry on.
Oh, I was going to say, and we really have to be looking for solving problems that our organization, that our teams are having at that moment. You can have an amazing solution, but if it's not something that's in people's purview or they're really focused on, it's a lot harder to make an impact with that. So sometimes, as important as things are for us, we kind of have to set them aside, have them ready for when the opportunity arises. But again, making other people's lives easier at work, helping them solve problems, has been the best way to grow the opportunities to conduct research and gather data.
No, for sure. So, any advice for those that might be that UX game developer that chooses not initially to involve user research?
So, good news is you can never research everything. So there are things that are going to go past and are going to go out there. One of two things can happen. The thing can go out there and it can be okay. It didn't have research. That may be okay. It didn't have a negative impact. That's all right. And sometimes you can have things go out that people made decisions. You can't change their mind. So you kind of have to let it happen. And if it doesn't turn out well, guess who's knocking at your door very shortly after? That patience piece and letting people make their own mistakes. I definitely say being around children and having a child made me understand how important that is. Because as much as you want people to learn from your experience or what you know, sometimes people just have to do it themselves. And if the worst case scenario in my world is it still worked out okay, I can sleep well at night.
For sure. Look, so let's break down this conversation a little bit more. What would you consider to be the three essential elements of a qualitative research toolkit in today's market?
That's a very good question. And sometimes people may start with particular techniques to use to elicit feedback and get information. But the three that I start with are who you speak to, what you ask them, and what you do with the data. And let me break that down a little bit more. Those three areas are the greatest chances for us to not do our job justice. So first off, make sure we have the right people in the room that are representing the audience that we're expecting or we know we need to bring in there. So bring in the right people and then make sure you're asking the right questions. Make sure they're not leading, make sure they give the opportunity to let the participant have the space to answer. So ask the right questions. And then when you get the data, knowing what to do with it. So sometimes it's knowing how to put it together. It's knowing how to synthesize a lot of content feedback and pulling out themes. But those are the three places where we can make a mistake that could change our research into a direction that's not very useful. So being skillful at identifying your audience, building unbiased and open questions, and then understanding what to do with those data, how to analyze for themes, pull out content. Those are the three things that are essential, I think, to a qualitative researcher's toolkit.
Well, how about when there is some flux and movement within the insights team? So you lose sometimes a lot of institutional knowledge, I guess, and also user research knowledge as well. If one of your team members move on, how do you keep that and maintain it to ensure that you're not having to do the same things over and over again?
Oh, yes. Nobody likes to repeat if they don't have to. So you're right. There will be times where some institutional knowledge is going to be lost. Sometimes that's for the better, though, because you want to make sure that you're doing things that you think should be done, but you also don't want previous knowledge to hold you back. You don't want to be thinking, oh, we tried that before and it didn't work, so we can't try it again. So you don't want to hold yourself back from that perspective. But often what we do, what I've done in places with our research is we keep a space to store it all. And we pull summaries from the research. And periodically our different members will write summaries so that it's highlighting, what we've used, what we've learned over maybe a 6-month or a year period. And that's definitely helpful. Now, what I can tell you, being in e-commerce now, it's actually kind of good to have a short memory because humans are amazing, thoughtful, interesting creatures on this world, and they can also be contradictory, confusing, difficult all at the same time. So in a nutshell, humans change and their shopping behaviors definitely change. So even things we tried 6 months ago, we still have to change them because our audience has changed and adapt. So a shorter memory, actually in e-commerce, I've noticed isn't such a bad thing.
Yeah, cool. Well, I guess you've got that whole think, say, do gaps. And so you're constantly needing to regurgitate those just to ensure, because all sorts of things can influence consumer behavior. But with having crisis after crisis, often come into our lives, aren't we? So our contexts are constantly changing.
Definitely.
So thinking about the maturity of the sector then, how advanced would you say qualitative research is today, and where do you see it heading?
It's interesting because I feel like qualitative research has been around since the beginning. That's how it started. People said things, they gave you feedback, or they had actions that were very confusing or expensive. The first human factor study, so studying how a human interacts with a system, happened because in the US military, back in the 40s, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, pilots were ejecting themselves from perfectly good planes when they were trying to drop their fuel. So that's the first time, I can't imagine what that would cost today, but that's the first time people started thinking about, should we start studying how people interact with things? This one happened to be a plane. It was purely economical. They didn't want to keep paying for new planes that were perfectly good.
Imagine the
So,
fright you'd get.
oh, I know. I know. I picture the movie Top Gun and maybe it not always going so well. But so qualitative research has always been around and it will be around. And what it provides is it provides the depth to understand why something's happening and how. Um, I know we'll probably touch upon it, but we always see data trends. Now it's big data. And now it's AI, and how do we use those things? All those data, I like to think of them as the little childhood character that you would send around for people to sign, Flat Stanley. I know my daughter had to mail it around. And, when we look at big data, it tells us what, and it tells us where things are happening, but it doesn't tell us why. So it's the Flat Stanley of data, that qualitative research. That's what makes your data model three-dimensional and really gives you that holistic understanding because it's bringing in the why.
Yes, and I guess just stepping further into that, there's that term big qual, and I'm assuming it's related as well. So what exactly is it, and how are you tackling the challenge it brings in delivering new qualitative insights?
I haven't actually heard it framed that way before. And it's funny, I was just at a qualitative research conference earlier this month, and we are still talking about big data, but some of the things that I noticed with qualitative data, it's not a one and done scenario. That I think is really important. You need to be getting it continuously throughout the process. And what you end up doing is you starting to build themes and volume with your stories. Again, I know I'm done with qualitative research a lot of the times because I don't get any new information as I continue to speak to people. So when I think about it, if we want to use the term big qual, it's helping people get to that point where they're pulling in all the unique insights, because that's what qualitative research is. It's identifying all the unique items. It's not saying how much volume each of them has. That's what the quantitative research is for. But how do you take all those qualitative moments and put them together to not have any more unique issues or items coming up?
And so how do you think the industry can tackle that and scale it as well?
The scaling part, I think, is definitely a challenge. Especially because there is a large segment of people who, if they don't like something, they don't tell you and they just leave. So I can see as more and more organizations go to getting those insights from people and talking to them, we may end up having at some point just fatigue in finding people to provide feedback consistently, and not just give us the answers that they think we want, but actually, what's really going on and what's really happening. So I think that definitely could be a challenge. I don't mind that challenge. I'd much rather have that challenge than no qualitative insights, but I could see that. And it's like storing and synthesizing those insights. That is a place where I think AI can help, but it can't do it for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess if we're going to touch upon AI, I'll probably touch upon the other part, and that's what people think of as the synthetic user. So if you put enough information into the AI, it will mimic what a real person will tell you. And I would say what I've seen thus far, we're not even close to that yet. But I do see AI as an opportunity to help to store those insights, bring them together, but you do still need a human to work through them, most definitely. But that might help with the scaling a bit.
Yeah, for sure. It's also interesting to see what will come of the likes of the Snap and the Meta glasses as well. So a whole lot of sort of visual recordings and interactions that we can actually see and start to mine, I guess, as well over time.
It's interesting that you say that, because one half of me thinks that's very awesome data to be able to look at and interpret and start to mine. But then I think of the other side of it. It has the likelihood to change how people's brains function and develop. And all of a sudden, we're all starting over again, because again, the human has changed and adapted in a new and unique way. That would be kind of fun, I think, most definitely. Even though I think my brain might hurt sometimes wearing those glasses and having all that information.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I had one of the employees from Snap on the podcast not too long ago as well, and we're talking about some of the things that they're doing with their glass, and it was quite incredible, the insights that they can get from it, and a lot of it observational, just how they're doing things and what it's opening up for clients, etc. as well. So I guess the toolkit that we have as market research is broadening, and just have to be discerning in terms of which ones you choose for what you're trying to achieve.
Most definitely. Now, I will say the one thing, as you described, that I think the Snap classes will do a benefit to researchers for is a lot of times we don't have the time, or everybody had the lab to do more eye tracking, more focus data. And again, to be fair, the equipment is limited, based on how people's eyes are sized and designed. This would be an opportunity to have a more global way to collect that kind of data, for sure. Because I know that's often we get questions about, what are people's first reaction? Do people seem excited? And right or wrong, I'm like, if I can't track their eye movements, or I can't track their body rhythms, skin response, anything biological, I really can't answer that question for you right now. So I think the glasses would be a nice way to be able to do that.
Yeah, and opt-in obviously as well. So so not invasive at all.
You bring up a very good point about data. Data, I think there's a Salesforce commercial with Matthew McConaughey here in the US, and he's in an old Wild West costume, and he's like, big data is the new Wild West. Does that mean your personal data is gold? And it is. In some ways, you are, have a rich set of information about yourselves that you shouldn't be giving away. probably, but you should know, sorry, if it's being used. So we are very focused on not just following policies that you have for sharing data, but really making sure that anytime data is being used, the consumer explicitly agrees to it, either by selecting to participate or by giving us permission to use their data. That is very important. That transparency and that trust. I mean, that's something that I hope all companies focus on with their customers. And that's one way to build trust in being clear and transparent in how you're using their data.
Yeah, absolutely. So in your intro, I covered off your background and it covered quantitative research as well, which included combining analytics, market, and user research data to tell a holistic story. So the data geek part that you mentioned. So I'm interested to hear what learnings you're able to bring with you from your quantitative experience, and then also what your qualitative experience has helped you with your quantitative side of things. I guess the mutual learnings from each.
Definitely. So there's a few examples. So one easy one is, we're a small research team for our digital properties here at Logitech. I like to say small and nimble. So we tend to use quantitative data from our analytics team to pinpoint areas within our experience that maybe there's problems, maybe we need to investigate further from that side, or it looks like something's working really, really well. We want to understand it more. So that helps us focus where we ask our qualitative questions and what type of users we want to ask, whether these are people who are buying particular products or focused in a particular space. So that's where quantitative research is driving the inclusion of qualitative, but we can also do the reverse. So one of the things I love to do is when we're coming up with new concepts, getting those concepts out early to the consumers to get their thoughts. They could be, just words on a page. They could be some visuals, but, getting the user's reaction and feedback and then making changes to them. So like we'll get feedback from 4 or 5 people one day, we'll make changes. So, based on certain factors, then we'll get feedback again. And then, so as the progress continues to a finished product, you have lots of data points, but they're all qualitative in nature and they're driving the direction of where to go. Because there's lots of times we get asked the question, is this right or is this wrong? Okay. I wish sometimes they would be easy. We may, ask users why, but I may just be using quantitative data and just say to people, look, they're both equally good. That's okay. Use other factors to decide which one to go with. So they're definitely both can set you up for success. If a project only ever has one of them, that's where I start to question it, because I think you need both to be fully successful.
Yeah, sure. In an instance like that, where would that directive come then? Would it, in your experience?
So if you're working in an organization that I was spoiled when I started my career. I started my career at IBM, and I think they were like 20 years into user-centered design. So the direction, it came from above. So not only above, but below. I mean, you came into a culture where that was an expectation, and you were measured on, your performance was measured in part based on that. Not every organization is that way. Lots of times you're starting from the bottom up. So I have, from this current job and others, developers, designers, who before they did anything new, they would come and ask, do we know anything about this? Can you help me? So that ground up. So you may be getting people to use the information in bits and pieces, but then it all feeds into the success of a project. And you start to notice, if you're doing that ground up, the bottom-up approach, you start to notice that there are projects that are more successful when these pieces are part of it. Now, at some point, the bottom-up does kind of stop, and you need to make sure you also have the top-down leadership to support you, and that's where the sponsors and the stakeholders come in. But what I will say is the organization also has to be ready for that change. And it's okay to say, you know what, the organization has a lot of different goals right now, and really understanding the user and doing things based, primarily on the user isn't where their focus is right now. And you may decide to do a different job or to go somewhere else. That's okay, because the organization also has to be ready for that change as well. And to be fair, it's a lot easier when the organization's ready. It's not fun when the organization is not quite ready to do it yet.
Yeah. So one other thing that's got me thinking just in this podcast as well is the innovation cycle. You've got your early adopters, your early majority, your late majority, your laggards, etc. In your experience with your user research, how do you get the balance of people within those different parts of the innovation cycle?
That's a really good question.
Because obviously you don't want to just do your early adopters, because that may just skew your research and think there's a massive opportunity, but we're actually maybe not so.
That's definitely can be a challenge. One of the things we focus on is, obviously we have great internal knowledge, and here at Logitech, a lot of us buy our products. I'm not going to lie, we get a really nice discount, which helps with that. So we have definitely experts in our product space. So we may test things internally with them, but like you said, they're only one perspective. So we always focus on bringing in consumers who specifically aren't current Logitech customers to get that more novice or sometimes just an untapped market perspective. While I'm based in the US, one of the things we did when I started a little over 2 years ago is we started conducting any research study that we did across different segments in North America, Europe. Sometimes we got Australia too. That's pretty much it from an Asia Pacific perspective. But again, English speaking or countries where English was one of the languages, we're a global company. We can't use US data to make decisions for the entire world. So that was one of the first things that I did that we just hadn't been doing before. And it wasn't because people didn't know, but the organization was just starting. So they were starting with no data. Let's start with US. And then I had the opportunity to expand upon it. So bringing in different cultures, different perspectives. Now, that being said, we do that at a more general focus right now. I can see as we continue to progress to be focusing in on more of the cultural perspectives and differences to better tailor our experiences to be useful and beneficial to those people without being the creepy side where it feels like they're watching everything you do. Like when you say something and you get an ad on Facebook the next day and you're like, coincidence?
Not even that same day, isn't it? So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's really good to hear. So I also said, and you mentioned just before as well, that you presented and attended Qual 360. So were there any major themes of note coming out of the conference that you thought others should know? I'm sure AI was one of them. But as we know in market research, like fundamentals are absolutely important. And if you don't hit off those, for instance, then it could just be a shiny distraction.
Very good point on the shiny distraction. So I have to admit the quality of presentations was high. I didn't see any shiny distractions
Nice.
from that perspective. One theme that I've noticed, and I believe it's going to continue, and that is the overlap and combination of market research and user research. Both have different techniques. We used to say years ago, market research tells us what people say they want, and user research tells us what they actually do. That separation isn't there anymore. So for the area, just the research area with consumers to grow, more combination of those skills, I think, is essential to, again, tell that holistic picture of our consumer. And there were multiple participants. I'm seeing more and more from cross fields, people from anthropology, sociology, psychology, people on the design side. So whether it's product or computer. So that theme, I think, is going to continue, and I appreciate that. There was definitely a focus on understanding what the user's thinking and feeling. And I think they called it, the one speaker called it emography, but it's really bringing in the how brains work, the neuropsychology, which for me has always been there because psych's my background. But what was exciting to me is I saw people who had non-traditional psych backgrounds embracing studying the brain and understanding the changes in the brain and how that impacts behavior. I thought that was very interesting. And there was one more, and I just completely blanked on what it was topic wise. But the other thing I noticed is I really like the size of that conference. It's an opportunity to get to hear a lot of different perspectives, but it also gave you time to talk with, I swear, out of 100-ish, 120-ish odd people, I think I spoke to 90 of them at different, like the opportunity to have small conversations, bigger conversations with people to connect. That's something that I really appreciated with that conference that stands out for me.
Yes. I'll do another plug. I'm assuming most of our audience has heard about WIRE, so Women in Research. There's an executive summit coming up in San Diego next month, and one of our people are attending that as well. And it's a 4-day summit where it's going to have lots of time, like you say, to interact and to network. And I think there's a big value in that, the connections that you make. You can often just discuss some of the biggest topics as well and progress those in your thinking as well, rather than it just being a huge brain dump and then you forgetting half of the things that you actually took in.
Oh, definitely. And thank you so much for mentioning that, because I had not realized that WIRE existed, which I feel really bad about until now. So thank you for sharing that.
That's right. It's a really good organization, and a number of our people have been involved, even mentoring as well within it too. So if you wanted another... So any final thoughts you'd like to leave with us, Jennifer, before we close?
Oh, hopefully my answers were helpful. Most definitely from that perspective. I very much enjoyed talking. And I think the one thing, I'm sorry, my earbud fell out. The one thing that I would leave you all with, and it's really what keeps me working. So I know someday we'll all get to the point where we're working not because we have to, because we want to retire, but because we want to. And the one thing that keeps me moving and excited for to work when I want to, is really that mentorship piece. So I ended up in the field that I'm in by accident, completely by accident. I was a graduate student teaching 500 undergrads who were like 3 years younger than me, intro to psychology. They absolutely did not want to be there. Big lecture hall, and I'm talking to people, which I'm going to date myself, on a listserv about how do I engage these students. I'm just asking for help. And one person reached out and said, "Oh, you like computers, you like to build them, you like psychology, you should come intern at my company." So I just said yes, and I applied, and that's how I ended up interning at IBM, realizing I could put those two things together. And so again, that gentleman is still around today. I still thank him when I see him, but his focus on mentoring and just bringing women into a traditionally male space, because he thought it was important, is what brought me here today. So I feel a positive obligation to definitely give back to that.
No, yes, there's a lot that we owe people that have gone before us. So thank you for the work that you're doing as well and helping those that are coming before you.
Thank you.
And thank you also for joining us on the show, Jennifer, and for sharing all of your insights. It's really interesting just to see how you at Logitech and the team are bringing not just user research, as you mentioned, but also market research, combining it to really make, I guess, the lives of consumers and your customers a lot easier, more enjoyable, and productive as well.
Oh, yes, we hope so. And I just want to take a moment to say thank you so much for having me. This was a unique opportunity for me to take some time and do this. And it may have seemed a little scary at first, but you made it very easy. And you're a very kind host. So thank you.
No, you're quite welcome. So thank you also to those who have listened in today. I hope you've found it as enjoyable and entertaining as I have as well. If you have liked what you've heard, feel free to reach out to myself or to Jennifer as well. I'm sure she's willing to share some other pearls about what she's done. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast or share it with others too. We'd be very thankful for those. Until next time, thanks for listening to Now That's Significant.